The following podcast is brought to you by CDKOffers.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off Windows codes and Die Shrink for 3% off all other codes. Links in the description, and I will say more later. But for now, let's get to the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a PC hardware and gaming podcast. It's actually the first episode or first month we've had 3 news roundup episodes in that same month. Unless you were a patron, I think it may have technically counted in March. And of course, I'm your host, Tom, and I am joined by
Dan. And if we're counting the non-news roundup, this is the first month with 4 Dan episodes, I think. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow.
It's been a Dan-heavy month in Tom's real life and in the podcast.
It's been a overwhelmingly Dan-heavy month, I have to say. But, it's fine. Over time, we just slowly get into our own routines and, less and less about... We don't have to have the same things at the same time and go running at the same time or anything. Actually, speaking of that, here in Peoria, not a lot of people listening to the quarantine anymore, I gotta say.
No, not really. We walked our dogs today. There were a lot of people out today.
Yeah, there were some weird people, I swear, baptizing someone in the fountain near my house.
That's probably not the greatest place to baptize someone, but...
It seems cleaner than most park fountains.
Yeah, but it's still a park fountain.
That's true. And then when we went to another kind of open park area with rolling hills and stuff, and there were people everywhere. And again, there's nothing wrong with going outside, but we saw several groups of friends just hanging.
Yeah, they were just kind of done with it. I think one group of people was talking about how their bachelor party went, so I guess...
What?
I guess bachelorette party went.
Okay.
So I guess they decided to go ahead with a bachelorette party.
Yeah, this is something me and you have been talking about with each other, Dan. It's I know people are oh, should we extend the quarantine? Should we open up now? Should we do a soft open up? And I just keep saying, it doesn't matter what you want to do. People are going to go outside in under 2 weeks. So you guys have 2 weeks left to make sure you have enough masks, test kits, whatever you need to then transition into if you're not in at-risk group, you can start going outside and stuff. Now, I don't know that means you should just open up concerts and movie theaters. Probably not. But people are just going to start going places. And I swear I've seen some restaurants just open randomly some days.
Yeah, that seems to be happening. I'm hoping things start opening up relatively soon because... I have 2 weddings this summer that I'm supposed to be going to, and I would like to be able to go to them. But
yeah, and I think people need to also consider the fact that this is things because we're inside closer to each other more, moving, because the sun's not killing viruses on the ground as often in the winter. Viruses tend to spread more in the winter, so this is most likely going to hit us again in the fall. I mean, if that's going to happen, shouldn't we be doing soft openings all summer to build up herd immunity? Because we're not getting a vaccine for a year. Most likely. I'm optimistic, but most likely.
Yeah, I think I saw 3 vaccines were in phase 2 trials, but phase 2 I don't know what percentage go to the population for trials, but I wouldn't bet on a phase 2 trial.
But I think what we're saying, though, is it's so either we can kill our economy, which look, I'm not making any argument here about what's the better choice. I'm just saying you are deciding to kill the economy and people are going to go outside anyway. So I would say maybe it should be soft openings as soon as possible. So we build up some level of herd immunity before fall hits.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's just my opinion.
And I don't know if I would bet or not that there's going to be a second wave in the fall. It could happen. It could not happen. We'll see.
I swear I saw a study come out in New York where they were 20% of the people they tested already had it. This may have been here, and it had to have been here with how contagious it is since December, that way more people have gotten it than anyone realizes. And that as we get more test kits, we're just going to find out like a third of us have already gotten it, maybe.
I wouldn't bet
Depending
on
on the city.
I wouldn't bet on some cities. I'm sure that's true, but we'll see. I mean,
I'm not saying a third of people in Montana did.
Well, maybe a third of people. But yeah, that would be great to hear that more people got it than we initially thought. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, this is exclusively a PC hardware and gaming podcast, so I think we should continue with that exclusive conversation. Nils writes in, and he says, fair warning, this is a fairly pedantic correction considering I'm sure almost everyone knew what you meant. All right, well, we'll decide if we hate you soon. The numbers for DDR that are advertised, well known, aren't actually the clock rates of DIMMs. That's the mega transfer rate, which is actually double the clock rate and the bandwidth in megabytes per second and the MTS rate times 8. Yeah, I know. It's just oftentimes the bits per second rate they show coincides with the megahertz. Not always, but I mean, I think where he's talking about our DDR5 and DDR4 conversations, and I do know that they specifically said over 8,000 megahertz DDR5 is what's expected in a few years.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand that's not what they were showing on the slide, but yeah.
No, I get what he's saying, and I know you. The clock is technically half of whatever is advertised. So, like, what DDR4 2400, the clock rate is bus clock rate is technically 1200. And I don't know if that's pedantic to say. I think a lot.
No, it's not pedantic.
I think I've heard that a lot in conversations as people kind of just say the clock rate is just that number you see after DDR4 or DDR3.
Yeah. But it's not pedantic, and I've decided that we don't hate you. Or I don't hate you. Do you hate him, Nils Dan?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We'll see.
Watch yourself, counselor. But anyways, let's move on to the stories. Didn't have a ton of corrections actually this week.
Hell yeah.
So I guess let's just get to story number 1. Asus prepares an odd combination for its new ZenBook, a 4700U 8-core 8-thread and an MX350 from Nvidia. And I'm quoting from Notebook Check. Fancy a GeForce MX350 with a Ryzen 7 4700U? Well, Asus thinks people will. Spotted by @RoGamer on 3D Mark, the combination will be coming in a new ZenBook 14 called the, UX434 IQ. The device will also feature 16 gigabytes of LPDDR4X at a blisteringly fast 4266 megahertz, and a 1 terabyte Samsung SSD. This is not the first time that we've seen references to this, though, in December. But anyways, I'm skipping ahead here a bit. Anyway, the inclusion of an entry-level GPU on a Renwar laptop seems strange, in our opinion. We expect that the RX Vega 8 will be an improvement over its predecessor, meaning that it should compete with entry-level GPUs like the GeForce MX350. Additionally, choosing to include a dedicated GPU undoubtedly increased costs, potentially making the ZenBook 14 a less attractive option. Incidentally, the UX434 IQ will probably run hotter and louder under load than the Ryzen 7 4700U equipped in the Swift 3 will. So this is an interesting, I think that's about as high as you'd want to go, including a low-end graphics card, but I would think this is a better combo with like a 1650. I don't understand, really.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier before we were recording this, that the inclusion of an MX350 is very odd because that's going to be a little more powerful than the 8 CUs that you get with the Renoir, but the Renoir is integrated, but not substantial.
The one thing I would say is when I looked at Renoir benchmarks on Hardware Unboxed, for instance, the results were kind of all over the place. There were some games where Renoir was only like 30% behind a 1650 Max Q. And then there were some where the 1650 wins by like 60%. So I think on average, the MX350 will be stronger than a 4900 HS by like 5% or so. But that's a 25 watt graphics card. I highly doubt the 15 watt version is. And the 4700U is probably 20% weaker than the 4900U's graphics. Yeah. So I guess this gives it 25% more. And Blokes actually pointed out in the Discord, okay, but now there's less thermal density. They'll be able to boost that 4700U probably higher while the graphics card's in usage.
I guess that's
so it might
true.
be a net 30% performance gain in games.
Yeah, because the 4700U, it's 6 cores, 12 threads, right? Or am I?
No, it's 8 cores, 8 threads.
Yeah, sorry. So I guess their higher clock rate might be achievable with this setup, but I feel like it might add, I don't know how much to the cost of the unit, but
Yeah, because they have to have a portion for the heatsink, and it's a bigger heatsink than the MX250.
yeah.
You know, it's the same package, but the die itself is bigger. So they do have to put in a real heatsink. It'll still be a cheap one, but yeah, I don't know. And then there's money to have the motherboard include this. And remember, these are not like, you know, AM4 motherboards. They have to custom design these and put in the tracing to communicate between everything on it.
Yeah, so I think a better pairing is, well, either pair the Renoir with nothing or put it with like a 1650 or like 16 Ti Max Q or something like that.
Yeah, but I thought I'd point that out. I mean, maybe we'll see. Maybe the three. Well, again, you know, the fact that the MX350 has 2 gigabytes of VRAM, I'm not really sure it can be that much stronger in a lot of games now. But yeah, I mean, it's just something interesting I thought to throw in there. H177 writes in, and he says, with all kinds of schools, businesses, and others buying laptops in the current environment of Intel CPU shortages and COVID closures, what will the laptop market look like in the next few months? Demand should be higher and supplies should be lower, but how will the non-enthusiast PC economy cope with this? Is pricing going to control the demand? Do we know if Lenovo, HP, or Dell's mentioned anything about this? Well, so I think I wrote some notes here when I put this on there. I'm seeing a lot of the cheaper laptops just be cheaper right now. And I think business laptops are harder to get. I have noticed that on HP's website when I checked a week ago. But I don't know. I think either way, consumers are just buying less of everything. That's something you're seeing pretty consistently in all markets right now. It doesn't matter what, except for alcohol, I guess it turns out. People are spending less. And me and Dan hasn't had a laptop for, when did yours break? Like a year ago or more?
Yeah, no, about a year ago exactly, I think.
Okay, and so you've just been making do with a phone and a desktop for now, which since you don't do that much mobile editing or rendering or code work right now, it seems fine.
Which,
but you want a laptop soon, so we were looking.
Well, yeah, so I wasn't sure about what the next year held for me, and for those curious, I did get into graduate school.
Oh, right, he did get into grad school. Gerard, you should play like some clapping noises right now. Or me and Dan we'll just clap.
So that was kind of contingent on my plans on buying a laptop or not, so I probably will get one now. And from what I've seen, like Best Buy is having clearance sales for usually a little bit of their like older models, I would say, but they're pretty good deals for what you can get for what they offer.
The one I found that I showed you was a Zephyrus last gen, I believe. But if I'm correct, it had a Ryzen 8 thread, didn't it?
It had a Ryzen 8 thread and
a 1660.
Yeah. So
with GDR6, I believe. And it was like $900.
So
that's a good deal.
Correct me if you think I'm wrong saying this, but I think demand for laptops is going to be down over the next year. I don't think I agree with what he's saying here. I think what H177 is saying, that demand will be up.
I don't doubt there's some businesses that made impulse buys for a bunch of laptops for their employees, but I think that's a temporary.
I suppose that's true. I mean, I guess for consumer laptops, I'm
just seeing greater and greater deals.
Yeah. So the economy is depressed, so fewer people are going to be buying them. I mean, I don't know if people have seen statistics, but I think it's like 27% of incoming college freshmen are reconsidering their college plans right now.
Jeez.
So that means that I doubt.
So if you need a laptop, man, this fall with Tiger Lake and Cezanne and the impending world doom, there may be lower prices than ever.
Yeah. So supply is probably going to be somewhat lower this year, but I also would bet that demand would be lower as well. I don't think it's going to go up.
And I don't think so. Not right away. I think next year we could have a booming economy again, but I think it's going to be
and maybe we see like this month a slight uptick in like Lenovo ThinkPad type stuff for businesses that are deciding to start working people from home more.
Yeah, and you know what? That is going to stay. There are going to be a lot of businesses that go, oh yeah, come back to the office, but half of you don't need to as much anymore, so you get laptops now.
Based on what I've heard from my friends that work in like a more office setting that recently graduated college, like most of the companies they work for are considering doing a more permanent work from home solution or semi work from home, like 2 days a week.
Our mom works for a pretty big major corporation, and she recently told us that they said that to her, that she can work from home for the next year.
Yeah.
So she's pretty happy about that.
Yeah, so I guess that those types of laptops, you might see an uptick in sales, but
yeah. And again, I was just looking. The last gen Razer is on eBay, from Razer, certified with warranty, refurbished, and I tend to buy those on eBay as often as possible, including my previous NV13 that I got for $700 with an 8-thread CPU and MX150. This was 2 or 3 years ago. I was very happy with that. And this was like $1,200, and it had an Ice Lake i7, which is the only Ice Lake you want. Let me reiterate that. The weaker Ice Lakes throttle like crazy because the bad 10 nanometer yields are genuinely bad yields. But it also had a 1650. And I was like, something that's smaller than my Envy. It was slightly smaller than my Envy and a MacBook Air. And yet it had a full 1650. Well, Max Q, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I'm seeing lower prices, I guess, is what I'm saying. But the reason I didn't get it is I went, where am I going right now? My laptop's fine. I've got my desktop with 16 cores and 16 gigabyte graphics card sitting right here. Until I know I'll be traveling multiple times a month again, I have no reason to upgrade because I just think prices are going to get cheaper. But, let us move on. We think we've talked about this enough. Ike's writes in, and he says, how do you think Intel will market Tiger Lake if, hypothetically, it tops out at 8 cores? Then AMD could likely launch an 8-core with similar IPC as an R5 probably a month later. I talked to Cortex about this. I don't know how they're going to market anything once Zen 3 is out. Because they have nothing, I'm pretty sure. Even latency, they'll probably lose in most. Even their bullshit Ryan Shrout real world usage benchmarks that are contrived ways of winning by 5% over AMD. I think Zen 3 is going to eliminate that. I think Tiger Lake will win some benchmarks, but I don't know that it's going to be any better than Zen 3 either at anything.
Well, Tiger Lake is going to be mostly relegated to laptops, though, correct?
Yeah, but I think that's what he's talking about too.
Okay, so I guess we'll see.
I think they're just reserving Willow Cove 14 nanometer Rocket Lake for desktop because I guess they hope people won't notice it's 150 watts. Might actually use more energy than Comet Lake.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I don't know. I mean, that's kind of been the entire story for, I would say, since Zen 2, definitely Zen 3 is there's not really a good reason to go for Intel processors right now.
There really isn't. I mean, all I can say is, look, Tiger Lake, and I talked to people on Twitter about this, is going to be competitive with Renoir. But it was meant to be like a Halo product. It wasn't meant to be this thing that's competing with AMD's budget, 8 compute unit APU. I think it's going to be like up to 30% better graphics performance than Renoir, although I'm maybe less. But then Renoir will win in CPU performance because it has double the cores, by 50%. Now, I think Tiger Lake has like a 5 to 10% IPC advantage over Renoir. And I think they'll have the same clock speeds. But still, look, I said this on Twitter. This isn't 2010. Having 8 cores matters now in almost every application.
Yeah.
And even in applications that only use 1 or 2 cores, that's not the only one you have open on Windows.
Yeah.
So this 50% CPU win, 10 to 30% GPU loss, they're going to be about even. But then AMD's rolling out Van Gogh, Cezanne, and I have more to say about Cezanne later. There may be several Cezanne dies. I don't know how they're competing with that. I honestly hope Intel can get 8-core Tiger Lake out before the end of the year, which I think they're trying to, so that there's some real crazy competition in laptops this fall. I think that's what you're looking for too.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see. And when you say 8-core Tiger Lake, do you mean 8-core just the actual Tiger Lake or just like Willow Cove in general?
I mean 8-core, 10 nanometer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we see that. That would be better for
everything.
Us. Yeah. But I don't know. They haven't proven that they can scale 10 nanometer to that yet very well. So we'll see if they can.
All right, let us move on to story number 2. So Apple supposedly will start selling Macs with ARM processors next year in 2021. And I quote from WCCF Tech, these processors will not initially be fast enough for MacBook Pro or iMacs, so the company will be introducing them with a new ARM-based MacBook. This is expected to be a 12-inch MacBook which was killed off last year due to not being quite to the performance level they wanted. Down the road, Apple also plans to replace Intel's Xeon chips and Mac Pros with its own high core count ARM chips.
So, I mean, that sounds to me like they're pretty bullish on ARM's potential to make high-end chips. I mean,
ARM makes some high core count server chips already.
Yeah,
I
guess
saw some
that's true.
presentations by them at Hot Chips.
I'm not remembering for those 12-inch laptops. Did they say what the core count would be on those? Or
I think they said 12 cores. Yeah,
for the 12-inch. I mean,
so I think it was like 8 fast cores and 4 little baby cores.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it could potentially be really good for the
target audience,
for the MacBook audience. Yeah,
as long as, because this is the 12-inch MacBook. 12-inch. This isn't the 13-inch one where you're expected to boot Windows and play Skyrim. This is one where they probably just do mostly web app stuff and editing. And I'm sure if the program is written to utilize Apple's ARM architecture flavor or whatever, I'm sure it will run as well as like an i5 or i7. And in fact, I've seen some of Apple's ARM CPUs and their own custom architectures that have IPC very close to Intel in the past. So
I mean, if they can manufacture a process that good, doesn't surprise me that Apple would try to make their own CPU production more in-house. They do like making their own stuff. So
Phil writes in and he says, do we have any idea if the Wuhan virus has halted any big releases, i.e. Chungus Navi and its GeForce counterpart? Interesting ways of phrasing things there, Phil. All I can say to this, I just threw this in here in the middle. Again, a COVID talk this episode. I don't think it's delaying nearly as much as people think. I'm going to say what I said all the way back to the initial COVID-19 die shrink, which is that I think most things a lot of things are going to be delayed 1 to 2 months. There will be some things, if they were early in development, that will be delayed half a year. And it's just going to be supply constraints for all those 1 to 2 month things, right? Because again, like take Zen 3, for example. That was design complete late last year. So this is just final work they're doing now.
Yeah, especially
most of it can be done remotely.
Especially given that it's on the same node, correct? So I mean,
it's on 7 nanometer enhanced, which has a couple of EUV layers.
So I mean, I don't really have too much to add to that, but probably not like super substantial, I wouldn't think. But
I can't speak for Nvidia, but I can speak for AMD quite a bit. Internally, all systems a go for Thanksgiving mega launch of Xbox, PlayStation, and Big Navi.
Yeah, and if we haven't seen any...
And they're just very careful what they tell suppliers because they know something could go wrong. But right now, it isn't going wrong.
And we haven't seen any indication yet from Microsoft or Sony that they're planning on delaying their consoles. So I would suspect that means those are design complete enough to go forward. I would think things that operate on the same or similar architectures are close enough to go forward this year. So
I think so too. And we'll talk about it more later when it comes to the consoles. But I don't think there's going to be much delays. And I think I have heard mixed things, though, about NVIDIA. I don't have any great sources with NVIDIA, but I do talk to people that I know probably do. And it really sounds like NVIDIA is more worried about getting out their lineup on time than AMD. But that's just an impression. I'm not confirming that. But anyways, let's move on. Number 3, Intel was planning to release 10 nanometer 6 and 8 core CPUs even into 2018. And I think I covered this in some of my 10 nanometer videos last year, but this comes from Adore TV, and it kind of adds on that they were continually planning to try to get 8 core 10 nanometer CPUs out. Now, because I mostly talked about last year how their initial roadmap was getting to 10 nanometer in 2015. And then 2016, and then 2017. But Adore talks about how even in 2018, they tried to make a 10-core or an 8-core Cannon Lake. And I quote, "One of Intel's most infamous architectures, if not the most infamous, has to be Cannon Lake. The first generation Intel CPU is held in such contempt that even Intel tries to forget it exists by redefining Ice Lake as the first 10-nanometer architecture and deleting the products formerly known as Cannon Lake page from the ARC database." And this is true, by the way. Some of my Intel sources say they used to call Ice Lake 10 nanometer plus plus. Now they just call it 10 nanometer, and they call Tiger Lake 10 nanometer plus. Which, if we're being
Oh, wow.
honest, effectively that's true. You can't say Cannon Lake was a real node. Anyways, continuing to read here. Officially, only the dual-core i3-8121U was ever released back then, without integrated graphics and with clock speeds and power worse than the 14-nanometer dual cores. But it seems Intel actually did create some 6- and 8-core engineering samples, and at least a handful of them worked and have shown up recently, and even a dual-core that had graphics working. So I find this interesting because I think that's something I've covered multiple times, is that there was this disconnect at Intel. The engineers, at least some of them, did think 10 nanometer was coming out in 2018. And they were trying to make 8 cores all the way back then.
Of course they were. They're trying to migrate from 14 nanometer to 10 nanometer. That would indicate that they would want to make 8-core processors.
Yeah.
Or at least 4 or 6-core processors, which they've clearly had problems with. That doesn't mean that they couldn't make one, which we've been joking about for a while. They probably made one 8-core Intel processor on 10
and I bet it was almost as good as Skylake.
Yeah.
I've seen 40-core Ice Lake Xeon engineering samples since 2018, I think. These things are all there. And that's something I just want to, again, emphasize. How did Intel get such tunnel vision on 10 nanometer and keep committing to something that wasn't going to work? It's because they thought they could get it to work, even when they were 2 years late. They were just like, if we just get this out in a year. And it's because they knew if they did get it out, though, they would crush AMD. And they would have. If 8-core, 10, which is just a die shrink, Cannon Lake was just a die shrink of Skylake. But if they actually got like a 95-watt 8-core out, because it was on 10 nanometer, in 2018, right when Zen Plus was out, that would have been better. And they really did plan to have 10 nanometer 8-core Ice Lake out in 2019. And it would have had 18%. They had engineering samples. They knew the architecture worked if they could make them. So they knew Ice Lake would have 18% higher IPC, 8 cores, like 65 watts, ideally, compared to Zen Plus. And if they would have gotten that out, that would have buried Zen Plus.
Well, yeah. If they would have gotten this to work, Ryzen and Zen 1 and Zen Plus, it would have been AMD makes better CPUs, but it still doesn't matter. That would have been the review.
That would have been the review. Like, Zen 1 was a brief win for AMD. Zen Plus, Intel's back.
Yeah.
And it has just as many cores now, uses less energy, and has 20% higher IPC total. And yeah. And, and then they would have probably followed up with a 10-core Tiger Lake in 2019. And a 10-core Tiger Lake may have beaten Zen 2, guys, if they could clock it the same. It would have had 10% higher IPC, fewer cores, but I don't know. It would have been competitive at least.
Yeah, it would be hard to say at that point because 16 cores. It's obviously the 16 cores are being utilized.
My desktop.
Obviously, the 16 cores on your desktop are being utilized, but maybe 10
cores with 10% higher IPC.
That might be better for the current environment we're in.
Yeah, and instead they'll have 8-core Tiger Lake competing with Zen 3, and Zen 3 should have the same IPC, if not a little more.
Yeah.
So I just want to emphasize that Intel really thought they were going to get all of these things, and that's why they got tunnel vision. And a lot of it also comes down to not lying, but the fact that or it doesn't come down to ineptness. What I'm told is that they just needed more money, more engineers, more hours of work to figure out their problems on 10 nanometer. And the executives were just concerned with high profit margins and didn't give the fabs the funding they needed. Now, when Zen 1 popped up, they immediately gave them the funding. And that's why, all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys have noticed, everyone has the top end version of Ice Lake now in their laptops, even cheap ones I've noticed.
Well, yeah, the competitor they were dealing with before Zen 1 was the 8350 was their top desktop processor for
the FX 9590.
Sorry.
#5 gigahertz 225 watt was their top competitor. And you know what, Dan? It almost matched a 84 watt i7. So joke's on you.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Egg on my face.
Yeah, triple the energy usage for almost the same performance. So, I mean, come on,
so
guys.
everybody really should have been buying that anyways.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, they'd been dealing with a stagnant competitor for what, like almost 5 years at that point. So, yeah.
It turns into it's not the products themselves, but the product margins, profit margins on those products.
Exactly.
Anyways, let us move on to number 4. Intel's 11th gen Rocket Lake S desktop CPUs will be compatible with Z490 LGA 1200 socket motherboards, and they will be updated to PCIe Gen 4.0 this year. I actually did cover this in my Years of Domination video talking about Zen 3 and Zen 4. I included some Rocket Lake leaks in there, but quoting from WCCF Tech here. The Intel 11th generation Rocket Lake S desktop CPU lineup has been confirmed many times in various leaks, but as the launch of the Z490 platform closes in, we're getting more info on what to expect from the upcoming family. First of all, the Z490 motherboards have been confirmed to get support for Intel's 10th generation desktop CPUs in future processors. And I will want to add this too. I know that there was, from some of my sources, a little bit of like, okay, so we know this early, these motherboards work with PCIe Gen 4, and we know Comet Lake, Intel's going to probably want to erase it from history like they did Cannon Lake. So what are they doing? Are they going to like advertise this? And it sounds like they might. They might actually advertise the motherboards as Rocket Lake ready and try to like make the argument, oh, you can get 10 cores now for the same price as AMD's 12 core, and you can upgrade later to, Rocket Lake. And if you get an i5 now with 6 cores, this will be compatible with 8-core Rocket Lake. I think that's how they're going to advertise it.
I mean, yeah, it seems as time goes on, Comet Lake and Rocket Lake keep getting more and more folded in on each other. I'm curious if they're just going to be advertised as the same thing at some point, because I don't see how all the space fits in for Comet Lake and Rocket Lake at this point. And I think they would probably introduce new chipsets usually with Rocket Lake, but does this mean that the Z490 chipset will be like the top end LGA 1200 chipset even for Rocket Lake, or do we not know that?
Yeah, this will be the top one. And again, this is all because Intel intended to get Comet Lake out Q1. It was delayed, like I reported it would be in October. Effectively 2 quarters. Like it's almost not going to be in full stock until Q3. And now the Rocket Lake was supposed to come out Q1 next year, but they keep pushing it up because they're like, this is the one that's good. Like Comet Lake is an utter waste of time. So we should just get Rocket Lake out as soon as possible.
It almost makes me wonder if they're just going to cancel Comet Lake.
Well, I don't think they will. I just think they're going to manufacture a certain amount and then switch to Rocket Lake as soon as possible.
That's probably true.
And it's worth emphasizing that the more information I receive about Rocket Lake, the more it's like it will have way higher. Well, it's going to have way higher IPC. I mean, Ice Lake and some even mainstream workloads had like 18% higher IPC than Skylake, and I saw in real tests, it had 15% in most things. So this is supposed to be about 10% more than that. So this is going to be like substantially better than Comet Lake. I mean, even just with 8 cores, which they're not going to bother going to 10 cores because there's power usage issues if they do. I think the 8 core will easily outperform the 10 core by 10, 20%.
Yeah, which will lead to some confusing marketing.
Again, like I've covered, Intel's just throwing anything they can make at the wall because that's all they can do.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. Doomberry writes in and he says, how soon do you expect 5 nanometer HPC products? I remember TSMC stating that they would be ramping up 5 nanometer HPC and 5 nanometer low power at the same time. I don't believe you've stated anything of the sort, but will we see Zen 3 desktop or laptop on 5 nanometer? No, I don't think so. We have a rumor that AMD has 20,000 5 nanometer wafers per month from Q2 2020. I have to double check that. I haven't seen that. I'm not saying you're wrong. You're probably right. Assuming this is credible though, what are they going to do with the output?
I mean, I will quickly say I did see. I don't know if I saw Q2. I thought I saw by the end of this year they were going to be on 20,000 5 nanometer wafers per month. AMD was so. I'm not sure what volume that leads to for like CPU production, but
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk. We know that they've bought ahead of time a shit ton of 7 nanometer capacity for the consoles and for Big Navi. So we know that's happening. I know Renoir is, I think, just on standard 7 nanometer. So what would be on 5 nanometer? Well, I'm pretty sure Cezanne's on 7 nanometer enhanced or full 7 nanometer EUV. And I know there's Van Gogh and a few other things coming out. I don't know. If I had to guess, it could be a swing at a HPC APU, maybe. Some kind of epic with graphics, HBM, and multiple Zen 3 cores, die shrunk on it. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
yeah.
I know that there's something called Rembrandt coming after all these names I threw out.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the big one. That could be the big one. Actually, I don't have firm evidence it is the big one, but we know it's coming. It's been referenced.
All slides we've seen so far say Zen 3 is going to be 7 nanometer. So I don't think you would see that. I don't think you would see 5 nanometer until Zen 4.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is, would it surprise me if they did some interesting Zen 3 plus die shrink to 5 nanometer on these tiny low power chips for like really cheap laptops? I don't know. Nothing AMD's doing right now would entirely surprise me.
Yeah, that could just be the follow up to Renoir too.
Like, this is leapfrogging. A lot of people are saying Cezanne's going to replace Renoir. The information I received is not that it's replacing it. It's that it's going above it, and then it's just kind of leapfrogging back and forth, which if you look around, that's kind of what they've always done. Even in graphics cards, it's like, 7 nanometer Radeon 7, and then that comes out, and that's above their other Vega and Polaris. And then all of a sudden, lower end 7 nanometer RDNA 1, and then they're going to leapfrog to 7 nanometer enhanced high end, and then probably leapfrog down to the weaker ones.
Yeah, I mean, that is true, I suppose. I don't know if that's a...
I mean, think about the Picasso and 3000 series on desktop. That's 12 nanometer.
Yeah. I guess it's too much of a pattern for it to not be a design philosophy at this point. But
well, it saves a lot of money. It's like if you're designing a new thing, let's use the latest stuff, but you're going to design it for a different segment to maximize how much you can use the die for. I don't know if that makes sense. I guess I'm going to say I don't really know what they could be using it for, but I know there's some server people talking about some crazy APUs coming out for servers, and a lot of people are like, why would you want that? But when I float it to them, they're like, are you kidding? I don't need to put graphics cards in my server clusters. We could make the blade half as tall and just cool an APU. That's super easy. Then we can upgrade our clusters and not have to put new graphics cards in. Just everything is right there. Yeah,
that's true.
But I guess let us move on then, though, to story number 5. So AMD updated the Ryzen 3 1200 with 12 nanometer Zen Plus architecture. And at first I ignored this story because I was like, 4 threads? Get to 32 threads, peasants. Who cares? But I didn't notice the price. And so this comes from Tom's Hardware. Apparently it's $60. $60 for a 12 nanometer quad core. No hyper threading, but
yeah. I mean, that's pretty in line with what they're putting out now. So, I mean, it's good to see that they're starting to capture a lot of the lower end market that was more relegated to what Intel could offer with like Pentiums. But
yeah, I mean, look at this for $60. I would not be surprised if it drifted down to 50, and then they just have above that for like 50% more money, like $75. A 6-core, 12-thread, 1600. And then it's just like the argument is, who is going to touch Celerons and Pentiums?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just to say like they're in line, like how much can you get like a 2700X now for? That's...
I don't know. I just say 150. It goes all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. But this is, if you're looking for a really low-end CPU, I guess this is the best option at this point. But
and if there's, let's say, I can see scenarios where I would recommend this, even if it just has 4 cores and you game. And that's for people, like, let's say you have some critical hardware failure and it like fries your desktop. You just have to build a new one now. It sucks. I've had things like that happen to me with my laptop where I just needed to buy a laptop. And it's like, well, this fits into X570. So you could just get, and X570s are going down in price, or a B550 is coming out soon, probably for $80. So you get a $50, $60 quad core, an $80 B550 motherboard, and then you can upgrade to 12-core or 16-core Zen 3 down the road when it's cheaper. Like, and as much as this, I am shitting on quad cores constantly now because, I mean, this will run games above 30 frames, I'm guessing. It'd have some stuttering in some of the bigger AAA games, but I don't know what you play, right?
Yeah, and
you can make do with this.
Yeah, and if you don't have the money, it's an option, especially given the breadth of CPUs you can get now in AM4.
Yeah, and I mean, most of those X570 motherboards have, like mine does, have 2 M.2 slots, and the B550 will have 1. You can just get, I mean, I showed it in my RDNA 3 video. I mean, a decent, and I mean above 3 gigabytes per second read NVMe drive that's Gen 3 is like $60 now. So you just throw that in there, half a terabyte of that. You can upgrade to Gen 4 whenever you want. You can upgrade to Zen 3 whenever you want. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I mean, I think eventually they're going to move Renoir disabled quad cores down to replace this in a year. But as the ultimate dirt cheap option. But for now, again, they can take very real market share with 12 nanometer chips. I think they're just going to keep making at least 1 or 2 12 nanometer chips for at least another year. Because if they run out of 7 nanometer capacity, they can just continue to spit these out at Global Foundries.
Yeah, that's true. Because I do think what Renoir has to offer is that seems like it's probably going to start capturing the lower end market for AMD. But this isn't a bad stopgap.
And it's not a bad idea to just have some 12 nanometer option on the table so that if Renoir sells out, people can buy this.
Yeah, that's true.
Blokes writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom. It's me again." Yeah, you do write to us quite a bit, Blokes, by the way. I have to kind of like limit it, like only 2 or 3 Blokes questions a podcast at most. I'm trying to limit it to 1, but this one was a really good one, so I'll at least read this one. "I believe you forgot the big reasoning behind why it would not be an 8-core Matisse Rome chiplet with a CCX disabled." He's talking about the 3100X, which I think I cut that story because we've talked about that enough. For those who don't know, 3100X, 3300X. The 3300X is a single CCX design with 18 megabytes of cache, which is pretty cool for $120, $130. Anyways, moving on though. He says, "You hint towards it through the wording, but you didn't explicitly state the meaning behind the terms. Aiming for the Pentium market is aiming for a very high volume market. It would be silly to throw away a very large chunk of perfectly good Ryzen /Threadripper /Epic chiplets with the yields being as good as they are and going the cut down of a defect of a binning reject route of the cute little Athlon 200G or whatever they call it. It's not how you serve a high-volume market. Because if you were to order 1 million Athlon 200GEs, they wouldn't be able to sell you that many. They don't have that many cut-downs of a defect of a binning rejected first-gen Ryzen mobile processor, which is true. I mean, I don't know. The 3100X has 2 disabled, has like an actual like chiplet with half of each CCX disabled. I doubt they have many of those.
No.
The yields are like 95%. Like, I don't know what, very, very small quantities. He says, "But if you were to produce extra small chips, that's when you can make very high volumes of chips using surprisingly few wafers." Cheers. Cute video, by the way. Which is a good point, and I think that's why they're using a single CCX design for the 3300X long term.
Yeah, and I mean, that has to be, I mean, if we're seeing like 95% for full chiplets, like, that's probably near 100% efficiency at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they can make as many of those as they want, and I think that's what they're going to continue to do with the 3300X. It would not surprise me if, and I don't know how much those IO dies cost, but I think they're like, $10, but then the interposer and like putting the package together is like another 20. So that leaves, if you make these like, they were to long-term just keep pumping out single CCX dies that were like 35 millimeters squared, they could make a shit ton of those.
Yeah.
And in fact, they could even rebrand. They could make a new version of the 3800X that has 2 of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So long term, that's kind of what I see happening is, the 3800X being the new 2700X and the 3300X possibly being rebranded even, or just continue to be sold, I guess, right? As the 4100X below Renoir APUs that will go up to 8 cores. And that's when, you'll just have these like $100 4-core 8 threads, or even cheaper, probably $80.
Yeah, or even cheaper. 4-core?
Yeah,
4-thread designs.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to bring out any new. I think it's done. I think that 1200 is the last quad core you're going to see without hyperthreading.
Yeah, I mean,
there's just no point, really.
That's getting to be a pretty damn outdated design. So,
and their yields are good enough. Like, there's really no point.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, let us move on to story number 6. So, AMD Zen 3 APUs and Cezanne leaks are all over Twitter and reported by many others, including WCCF Tech, after being covered 2 months ago, quote unquote, exclusively by Moore's Law is dead. Now, there was some consternation here. Let me say this out of the gate. I need to address something of people saying it was a speculation video. It's like, well, I guessed at the name Cezanne, but I put a lot of thought into it. And we already knew from people like Aposat, Kamachi, Rogame, that there was a Cezanne being tested.
Yeah.
So it was an educated guess. It wasn't just rampant speculation. And I mean, yeah, though, I got information that lines up a lot with what Rogame and others were talking about. And I did reach out to WCCF Tech, and they did include my video in the middle of the article, quite randomly, by the way. Thought that was odd. There's like no context. It's just like in between paragraphs, one of my videos.
I mean,
but that was nice of them to add it quickly.
Yeah, I'm glad they gave you credit for it.
Yeah, but so those who don't know, there are more benchmarks coming out of a Zen 3 plus RDNA 2 APU being tested. Now, Rogame talked to me, said how he thinks it's a smaller APU than what I addressed, and I never thought about that until now. But just so you guys know, and I'm probably going to put this into some kind of APU update video at some point. The person who messaged me had some really cryptic wording, and it was like some weird guerrilla mail messages. So I didn't really have a way to communicate with him well. But he said the big die has this and the small die has this. And I didn't really know what that meant. I think there might be a big version of Cezanne and a small version.
Okay.
Now, maybe this will be called Van Gogh or something. Yeah. Or one of them will be called Van Gogh. One of them will be called that. But I think there could be 2 Cezanne dies. One with 24 compute units, one with 12 to 16.
Okay. I don't know. I have too much to add.
So I just want to throw that out there to Rogame and others saying, no, yours was bigger. It's like, there were 2 referenced, but I only got the die configuration for the big one.
So that's what you mostly went with for the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there could be like the 24, and then maybe just another 8 CU one that's meant to be like, 100 millimeters squared.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know yet, so.
Anyways, another 5 nanometer one. Story number 7. AMD's Best Buds TSMC designed an enhanced 5 nanometer node for its future Ryzen chips. And this comes from PC Gamer. And I quote, AMD's chip manufacturing partner, which they are just straight up partners now, clearly, guys, TSMC, has reportedly created an enhanced version of its 5 nanometer node specifically for its next generation products. Well, its next generation products, it's next generation products, technically. The Red Team's 5 nanometer processors and graphics cards are still a little ways off, with only the AMD Zen 4 CPUs currently pegged for the teeny tiny production of lithography. Although, again, what that reader mail guy pointed out, there's definitely other things being planned sooner rather than later on it.
Yeah, definitely. So what we'll probably see, I would think what RDNA 3 and Zen 4 will probably have 5 nanometer on it, right?
Yeah, they've announced that Zen 4 will.
Yeah.
So I will take a bet that it will.
Yeah, unless there's some problem with scaling the architecture to 5 nanometer, but
I don't think so. But no, so I think this is a huge deal. Like the thing people are like, oh, so this means TSMC is a big partner with AMD, and then they stop talking. No, the big point is that Nvidia can't buy the same node now.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, is anyone else noticing this? That when they say AMD is TSMC's partner, they're not fucking kidding. Like, AMD and TSMC are practically going to war with Intel at this point. And that's the only reason TSMC would do this. Like, to make sure AMD gets as much of a lead as it can. And this is really important going into 2022. You know, the thumbnail for this was the 5 nanometer, Mexican standoff of like 2022. And that's what it's going to be. This is going to be everyone, I think Golden Cove is going to be impressive. But at the same time, AMD's got a custom 5 nanometer. If this is going to be 20% better than any node NVIDIA can even buy.
Yeah. And given the partnership, like I'm sure consoles eventually will start moving to 5 nanometer at some point. just to bolster the relationship AMD and TSMC has, like, I think AMD is probably getting to the point where in some way they're
bigger than Apple now. They
they're probably their
say
biggest partner at this point, right?
Yeah, and it's because they have so many different architectures, both CPU and GPU, that they can leverage in heterogeneous designs for consoles, for laptops, for desktops, for servers. And TSMC knows that these are all markets, especially the console and the server market, where if they make them, they'll buy them.
Yeah.
That's why I talked about how like a source said like they just guaranteed resources to Sony early. Because if you're Sony, you're going to call AMD and say, hey, I don't know how many people are going to buy RDNA 2 on desktop, but we promise they will buy our consoles if you make them.
I mean, yeah.
And that type of a guarantee to TSMC, why would TSMC not?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're probably going to see, like 150 million TSMC AMD designed products in the future in the console market. So,
I mean, you mean for next gen?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty safe to say is if you combine Xbox and PlayStation, it should hit. And there are rumors Nintendo's next Switch follow-up may be AMD, which is almost ridiculous. It wasn't originally, by the way.
Yeah, that is interesting that they went with Nvidia for the Switch, but
yeah, I don't remember what the reasons were. I think Nvidia was basically giving them to them for free.
I mean,
no one wants Tegra, so probably.
Yeah, and not being in any console probably doesn't look great when AMD is doing so well in the console market right now.
Yeah. Well, let us move on to story number 8. TSMC ramps 5 nanometer quicker than expected, as we're basically been talking about. But 3 nanometer is probably going to be delayed a year. Oh no, we only get 3 nanometer in 2023? Anyways, I quote from WCCF Tech. The delay for 3 nanometer is said to be 6 months, but could be delayed more because of our current situation in the world. According to media reports, the 6 months puts back the tooling of the factory and the trial period, which leaves it to start in December. So, I mean, yeah, what did I write here in the notes? I think it's pretty obvious this year's the 6 and 7 nanometer year, and there will be 6 nanometer products next year. But late 2022, the 5 nanometer era begins. You're just going to see tons of 5 nanometer products until probably late 2023 when we get 3. And then after that, that's when I stop making bets on when things are coming out because I don't know what's going to be required. Well, I did recently see today some information about them starting 2 nanometer work. So
yeah.
I wouldn't surprise me if we got 2 nanometer in 2025. That's pretty much when we're done, I think.
I don't know how many product delays this would really lead to. I mean, 5 nanometer will start probably showing up in products end of next year, maybe.
I mean, yeah, I think so.
So given that that's probably going to be dominant for like 2 years, I don't think this is going to have that huge of an impact or that huge of an impact that we could foresee right now, at least.
I mean, I think what you might mean is it's not going to feel like we're slowing down.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. Who knows? Maybe Zen 5 could have been on 3 nanometer,
which is crazy
and it
to
will
talk
be on
about now.
And it will be on 5 nanometer now instead. But that's thinking pretty far into the future, and we don't even know what Zen 5 will be yet. So,
and again, that's the thing that makes me stop upgrading unless I need it. I mean, I held on to that 6700K a year longer than I probably should have. Most people would have gotten a 2700X or Threadripper way sooner. And I almost did a couple times, but it's like with how fast things are innovating, I'm like, no, I'm waiting for Zen 2. And then I splurged. And it's like, no, I don't think I'm getting any Zen 3 products. I think it's Zen 4 or Zen 5 because I think we're just going to have 5 nanometer Zen 4 with like stacked memory on the die late in under 2 years from now or something. So,
yeah,
I mean, right. Yeah. It's 2020. Yeah. In under 2 years from now, potentially. Like, so like if you need to upgrade, guys, do it. But I don't see this insane innovation. I mean, again, and I talk about that in the AMD domination video that I recently did. Like in 2017, we had 95 watt 8 cores and 16 threads, and all of a sudden you could get AMD quad cores for $100. Fast forward just like a few years later, now you get 8 threads for $100 and 16 cores at like $700, 12 cores, 24 threads at 400 now, about $400 now. It's 2020. In a few years, it's going to be 32 cores. And I think we're going to be just get to 2 nanometer in like 2027. And then that's when things will start stagnating again as we figure out unless by then though, we might have 3D stacking figured out and then that'll start a whole new thing.
Yeah. I mean, it would be really cool if we just didn't stagnate for like a decade, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
For my new benchmarking station, I did use a legitimate key of Windows 10 Professional, and that's because it's just not expensive if you go to CDK Offers. They did sponsor me to say this, but I used their website and it works well. They have great customer support, and if you use offer code Broken Silicon, you'll get 25% off Windows software, and Die Shrink gets you 3% off all software on the website, including game codes. I will reiterate, it was really easy for me to actually set up an account on this website, search for Windows, buy the code using whatever payment method I wanted, and they do have several options, and then I simply got sent the authentic key and downloaded Windows 10 from Microsoft's website. Save yourself some money to get more bones for your dog, and don't stress yourself out using illegitimate keys. These are real keys, and they did sponsor this part of the video, so one more time, that's cdkoffers.com. Use Die Shrink for 3% off all software on the website, including Steam games, and Broken Silicon for 25% off software. All right, now let's get to the benchmarking.
VI Pass writes in, and he says, Ray Tracing Minecraft Beta is finally out. I had to use my kid's PC to try it out, as I have a 5700 XT, but my old 2060, I don't know if it's that old, 2060, 5700 XT, these are just like one tier apart, guys. Your kids have a pretty good gaming PC, as much shit as they give Nvidia. But anyways, I played it at 1080p max settings at about 50 frames per second using DLSS, which the DLSS on this game, I could not tell the difference visually, whether it was on or off. This was on a 2060, an E5 2689, 3.3 gigahertz all-core, 8-core, 16-thread processor. Interesting. With 32 gigabytes of DDR3 quad-channel RAM. It's a very, very good kid PC with your quad-channel 8-core Xeon in 2060. Just let me add that again. CPU usage was at 23%, GPU 32%. So it seems like they could take advantage of the leftover power somehow. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But I'm not a developer, and I'm too lazy to look into what actually was bottlenecking in the RTX card when the RT cores were in use. I just figured if the GTX series could brute force ray tracing with CUDA cores, considering this 23% GPU usage, then why couldn't they code it to max out the video card usage to improve frame rate, even though it might only be another 4 to 5 frames per second? So yeah, that's interesting. I know Hardware Unboxed found like 10 or 20% reduced power usage in the original Battlefield 5 ray tracing benchmarks, meaning that tensor cores were easily the bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, which based on all understanding we have of how ray tracing currently works makes sense because there's not enough tensor cores to actually ray trace effectively, but
yeah, and I mean the one thing, and that's what I really expect out of Ampere, which there will be 2 flavors of Ampere. I think they're going to go to pay as much as they can, as much as they need to get TSMC's 7 nanometer for their top, 120 compute unit or whatever, or SM cards, and then they'll use 8 nanometer for everything below that. And I think it's just going to be like, I think you're going to see clock speeds go up by 20%. I think you're going to see CUDA core count go up by 20%, but I think you're going to see RT and tensor core count double or something.
Hopefully.
With a more effective architecture for leveraging it too. And what I hear about RDNA too as well is that the per compute unit method is pretty powerful too. So I think we're going to get quite an uplift. And with the rebalancing of the architecture, I mean, 23% or 32% GPU usage. I think that's something they're going to fix.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean,
they basically had to guess how much ray tracing performance to give their cards when they knew, even though they told people otherwise, they knew it was going to be a gimmick for the first 2 years.
Well, yeah, that's because it wasn't originally like designed for ray tracing. It was for AI workloads, right?
Well, the tensor cores and Volta were.
Yeah.
But they did mean to use them for the rate. That's how the denoising is done.
Yeah.
With RTX cards.
I mean, I'd be curious to see what the difference is with ray tracing and DLSS turned off, I'm sure you would get higher than 50 FPS with that setup without any of that on. But I'm just curious what the GPU usage maxes out at using the 2060 on Minecraft.
Anyways, and to actually answer your question, why don't they program better to brute force use the CUDA cores when so few were being used in this demo? It's because they don't want to. They want you to buy an RTX card. And actually, on that note, I did get a tip off to a, say, Russian tech tuber, and I couldn't make out most of it. So I'm not going to go super in depth because I just have to freely admit I don't fully understand what he was saying, even with the auto-generated subtitles in English. But they got DLSS, at least software-wise, or at least enabled to some degree on the Radeon 7 and 1660 Super.
Yeah,
in a few games. Now, what was interesting, I read a couple comments, including one pinned by the creator of the video. The link will be in the description for those who speak Russian. Please tell me what they were talking about or give me a synopsis. But it seemed like an NVIDIA rep in Russia reached out to them, and they, at least the translation I read, said that NVIDIA reps said the reason you got ray tracing working on Radeon 7 is you were effectively only using half of it. You were using the upscaling tech included in the latest Unreal Engine.
Interesting.
Which they said made it look way better, to which they responded, why the hell doesn't everyone have access to this updated upscaling tech, which for those who don't know is in the consoles, right? And they didn't say anything. They said you were using a poor man's DLSS. And they said, well, it looked about as good as the original one, thus suggesting in a lot of these DLSS-enabled games, it's just the goddamn upscaling.
Well, yeah, because
which is something I'm getting so annoyed about when people are like, "How's AMD going to compete with this?" And I was made fun of by a couple people for saying AMD will have their own solution in under a year. Trust me. And they're like, "Well, they can't do that without tensor cores." Yeah, dipshits, they can. Nvidia doesn't need half of their crap for half of their gimmick technologies they have right now. The tensor cores are for professional applications. They're selling you snake oil so you justify paying $800 for a 2080.
Yeah, so when you get that nice AI accelerated super sampling, you get really fun flickering on board.
Well, they don't have that in DLSS 2.0, which I don't believe I included DLSS 2.0 as a main story. So I do want to take the time to talk about that now. It works, but it's not as impressive as people are making it out to. I just want you guys to know that's my opinion. When I looked at Control, and everyone was, I just couldn't disagree more with the assessments I saw, where they were like, you can't tell the difference between DLSS. I'm like, well, I could immediately. So immediately, I could immediately in Control. Now, Battlefield was much more impressive, and some of the other games looked better. But this idea that DLSS has no visual performance loss, I just disagree. Like, I looked at the screenshots, and I could immediately tell which one had it on. It looked fuzzier. Upscaling with a sharpening filter can probably do most of what DLSS does most of the time. And I'm not going to take DLSS 2.0 seriously until most games have it at launch, right? I don't care that you can use DLSS 2 in Battlefield 5, a game from when? 17, 18? It was 2018. You know, so we're talking about a 2-year-old game that I can max out at 120 hertz in full 4K on my Radeon 7 now.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have it at launch, but you didn't. Same thing with Control. I don't care that they're adding DLSS 2.0 to like 3 games
and
2 years
Tom
after
and
they come
Dan
out.
jumping in again. This is a recording made after we made the initial podcast recording. As I was doing the final pass listening to the podcast, I thought it would be worthy to double check the DLSS results for 2 reasons. Number one, the original link to that guy who's Russian, I think that video is private now. So if someone watched that and speaks Russian and remembers exactly what he said, still in the comments, please tell us. But I'm not sure why he pulled that. I just know it's not there anymore. And so I thought it would be good to double check the TechSpot link to the DLSS testing. And we just pulled up Control and randomly. I didn't cherry pick anything. And again, just to, because I really wasn't sure if I was being too harsh on DLSS 2.0. But would you agree, Dan? When we look, it's not that impressive.
No, I mean, of the screenshots I saw at of the 4K test they did, I would say 4K upscaled and DLSS all looked pretty damn similar.
You mean 1440p upscaled to 4K?
Yeah, 1440p upscaled to 4K, 4K, and then DLSS
4K.
at 14. Yeah, it all looked pretty damn similar to me.
Like, and it got to the point where we were zooming in on my 1080p monitors, and I was like, well, this isn't good enough. And so I downloaded the raw, full, compressed 4K pictures, put them on my OLED TV, ones where we can put our eyes next to the pixels and actually see them individually. It didn't help at all. It didn't make the DLSS argument any better, even at native 4K.
Yeah, exactly.
With my eyes next to the pixels. I mean, at a certain point, me and Dan, I think, came to the conclusion we can't honestly say one looks that much better, except 4K looked a little better. And mostly between 1440p upscaled and 4K with DLSS, it just looked like you were kind of randomly choosing different things to be slightly blurry.
Yeah, and I can't say which one is better, honestly, so...
So yeah, I think I have to double down here. I think everyone's focusing on that you can barely tell the difference and you get a 40% performance boost. I mean, I'm pretty sure you just get a 50% performance boost running 1440p upscaled to 4K. And again, as we talked about, the fact that Unreal Engine has some newer upscaling tech tells me that that's most of it.
I mean, yeah, that's most, if not all of it, I would guess, honestly.
Like, and this is just 4K. Where I can say certain things in the DLSS image looked clearer than the 1440p upscaled. I would say it looked maybe slightly better, but then the raw 4K looked obviously better. Although, again, I don't know if it's worth the performance boost. You talk about this with your Vega 56. If you're not getting 60 frames, you just keep bumping down resolution scale. It's usually around 80, but until you get 60, right?
Yeah, I would much rather have the higher frame rate.
And it looks fine,
speaking.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so... The last thing to say about this is we looked at the 1440p results, and man, does it look like shit. Like, I'm sorry, I really think standard 1080p looks better than 1440p with DLSS. Yeah, like, obviously better. Like, the shadows were missing on some objects.
Yeah, which I guess I can't speak. Maybe they changed some other setting, too, because that doesn't make sense to me why the shadows just straight up weren't there, but...
Yeah, and I guess I guess two final thoughts. I stand by my opinion. DLSS 2.0 does not impress me. It's a handful of games that got a feature 2 years after it came out, when most people who are gonna play it are done playing it. And while you get a 40% performance boost, and I would say the visual quality is maybe slightly better than just running it in 1440p, I don't think you get the same performance boost you would just running it in 1440p. The only thing we can really say is it doesn't seem like it's worse than just upscaling, unlike DLSS 1.0.
Yeah, I think that's the best you can say for it at this point.
And it seems like 4K with DLSS, there may be some argument in some games, but the 1440p is just a joke. And maybe as we move to 5K and 8K, it will be worth it. But again, it's like, that's the other thing I want to say. I doubled down on my opinion that the next-gen consoles, as long as they're above 1440p, with good assets, I don't think anyone's going to tell the difference between any resolutions dynamically shifting. I really do think the PS5 and Xbox Series X, no one's arguing over resolutions anymore. At least no one with a brain.
Yeah, especially given that I bet a lot of textures won't even be fully utilized at 4K and max out a lot of the time at 1440p. But
yeah, so I mean that's all there really is to say about that. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Moving on to story number 9. Razer launches an updated Blade Stealth 13-inch laptop with a GTX 1650 Ti graphics card, which is basically just a 1650 with all 1024 CUDA cores and GDR6.
Yeah.
Quoting from PC Mag, the high-tech display is perhaps the most immediately eye-catching addition, but it's not the only feature. In addition to a 120Hz display as standard, it's now joined by a 1650 Ti Max Q, up from the previous 1650, and an Ice Lake i7. I will note this, the previous 1650 had the same CUDA core count. The mobile 1650 was clocked lower but had more cores.
Mm-hmm.
And it had GDR5 before, though.
Yeah.
So this should be about 10% stronger. This should be about a full desktop 1650, almost to a 570 in performance in a smaller than MacBook Air form factor. I just included this because that's crazy.
I mean, I am liking how laptop companies are. How OEMs are coming out with more and more laptops that have decent to. Well, this is going to have pretty damn good performance, mid-range performance, and a small form factor. I don't know why that didn't become more popular early on. Maybe it's just battery tech, but
yeah, which I think this does just have like a 6 to 8 hour battery life.
That's not bad though. If we're comparing it
considering it's a mid-range gaming laptop,
and if we're comparing if we're comparing it to stuff from even 5 years ago, 6 to 8 hours of battery life for this is way better than what you used to get.
Yeah, ever since I got my MacBook Air in 2014 that had Broadwell, that easily had over 10 hours. It had about a 10-hour battery life. I feel like my NV13T with, I don't remember if it was a weaker Whiskey Lake i7 than what I have now, and an MX150. That had about an 8 hour. I would say my new one has a 10 hour again. I think that's it. 10 hours is the limit for me. So if they can get a future version with Tiger Lake and set, or I don't think they're going to do the 1700 series. I think they're just going to have everything be the 3000 series from what I'm told. So, and a 3050 Ti in there. Yeah, I mean, that's when I might upgrade late next year to if I start traveling a lot again, to like the next hot chips or whatever. Like that's what I'll bring to render it. I know for a fact I've been told that these Turing mobile cards are pretty good at encoding and exporting videos.
Yeah, so I mean, this type of stuff is a great option for you. It's pretty expensive, right? $1,800 or something.
Yeah, and the version I would get would be $2,000. That's why. Yeah, but here's the thing: manufacturer refurbished versions will be like $1,200 on eBay in 6 months.
Yeah, if you're willing to wait for laptops a few months, you can usually get them for a way lower price than what they launched at.
Yeah, there's these people that buy them up in bulk with a manufacturer refurbished warranty. And you can, I found some $500 quad core i7s, 8 threads with MX150s. $500, 16 gigs of RAM, NVMe SSD. Look, an MX150 is nothing to write home about anymore, but that'll run plenty of games.
That will still run most games at low settings probably, or am I?
Oh, minimum settings. Minimum of the minimum.
But this is cool. I'm curious about the 120 hertz display. I'm curious if that will even be utilized.
I would go to the, I don't know if it's OLED with the 4K display.
Yeah, because it's
for editing reasons.
And I wonder if that's even really utilizable with the graphics card that's included. But
I bet at whatever settings I'm running Mountain Blade Bannerlord on my MX250 now, it probably run 120 hertz.
That's true.
But no, the reason I brought up this, it's really not a big news announcement. It isn't. Basically what they did is they added 50% more bandwidth to the previous graphics card and a nicer display. But I'm just pointing this out, guys. This is where we're at now with 12 nanometer graphics cards and 10 nanometer processors. When you get something like Cezanne, baby Cezanne 8-core, combined with some kind of 7 nanometer enhanced RDNA 2 6500M or 8 nanometer Ampere, whatever. Like, this is going to be over double the performance of this in a year, under a year. And this is what interests me. This could keep up with the next gen consoles for a year. The processor eventually is going to be too weak.
Yeah, that's true.
I guarantee next year, the updated version, maybe not of this one, but there will be competitors from HP and Dell, and maybe Apple if they upgrade their MacBook Air. I don't want to get into that, but the MacBook Air is a little weak in my opinion this year. It has a nice display though. But I think if we're seeing this now, you're going to see something at least twice as powerful with 8 cores next year, and then you're getting somewhere where if this is a 570, if you can double this performance to get you to almost a Vega 56, you're to, maybe a third the performance of the next gen consoles. That will run the next gen console games just at a lower resolution.
Very much lower resolution, but you can keep
1080p is a fourth.
I don't think you should get a laptop to be a desktop
performance. You want
replacement
for
completely.
Me, yeah.
But and I also think it's good to highlight every once in a while that I think laptops are kind of almost at the best they've ever been. Like,
they're so great now.
Every niche you need is available for laptops now. They're good prices. Battery life is better than it's ever been.
Across the board, too. Even the desktop replacements, at least they don't last 30 minutes. At least it's like 2 hours now.
Which, I mean, I guess that's enough time to, if you're in
Go
college.
to a meeting.
Or yeah, if you're in college or if you're in a business, you can have that thing on the entire meeting or class you're in.
She couldn't before.
Yeah.
I remember in college I had a desktop replacement. But yeah, so I guess let's move on. Joe Starr writes him, what do you think the odds are of a consumer level Huawei graphics card? Quite possible, honestly.
I would say the big thing holding it back is the US doesn't like Huawei, and I bet a lot of stuff is going to get banned from Huawei. Or it already is right now, isn't it?
Yeah, you might have to import it on eBay or something.
Yeah, and hear a lot of people telling you that there's a bug in your graphics card, but
yeah,
which I don't think is true, to be clear. But
I just highlight this again. For now, it's just going to be Nvidia, Intel, soon Intel, and AMD in the graphics market. And I don't rule out Intel. I think they will be in the low to mid range in a year or two. And eventually, I think they will make it into the high end. I think. I'm not sure. I think they will, though. But again, also don't rule out all of these others like ARM and stuff like that. Like I talked to John Petty about that in that podcast, and he talked about how, well, ARM's approach basically is they put together the full tool set and architecture features for ARM right now. They just expect a third party to scale it up if they want to.
Yeah.
And so at any point, we could see this happen. Do I think it would be easy to compete with AMD and Nvidia? No. Do I think we should rule out, though, someone coming in and just being like, they're making 40 to 80% margins. We're happy with 10%. Yes, this will only compete with their lower mid-range cards and use more energy, but we're going to sell it for half the cost, like $200. I wouldn't rule that out. I continue to believe we're going to see that at some point in the next 5 years.
Well, yeah, a big company like Huawei getting into this, as long as they have a big enough war chest to put up with maybe early low adoption rates, like they could become a legitimate competitor like 2 to 3 years after getting into the market.
Yeah, like,
if they tried to.
Which is why I brought up Xingjia. They're meant to make graphics cards for like government Chinese servers and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's their backbone. That I could see them make consumer versions for the Chinese market at least. And at least there's something. There's some kind of a third or fourth check on the big three. Because you do need that every now and then. Someone entering in the market and being like, hey, we're here too if all of you guys act like idiots.
I mean, yeah, before like the big 3D graphics cards were a thing, like there were a lot more competitors in the space, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting how over time we see all of those competitors get whittled down to like 2 or 3. And I'm curious if we'll ever see...
Same with the console market.
Yeah, I should have been more explicit. That's what I was referencing. I'm curious if we'll ever see that expand again, and it would be cool to see it expand again, I think.
Yeah. Well, let us move on. Speaking of graphics cards, story number 10. Arcturus is spotted again, this time with 120 compute units. And this comes from Tech PowerUp. The reported configuration is an Arcturus GPU with 120 CUs, resulting in a CDNA core count, because that's what they're going to call new GCNs pretty much, of 7,680 cores. These cores are running at a frequency of only 878 megahertz for the core clock and 750 megahertz for the SoC clock, and a surprising 1,200 megahertz HBM2 memory clock. While the SoC and core clocks are lower than the previous reported one, along with the CU count, the memory clock is up by 200. It is important to note that this is a test board variation of the MI100 they had before. This comes from Tech PowerUp, which before they actually got their hands on a BIOS of the original sample. And the original sample had slower memory, but it had 8192 cores.
Yeah.
And it clocked to 1,200 megahertz. So this is obviously some kind of engineering sample, but it does hint at a 20% bandwidth boost over the MI60. I have a version of the MI60. And I don't know. I think I bring this up just because I think this is interesting, that this is still floating around out there, CDNA 1.0. And I've been thinking about it. I mean, I think a 4096-bit bus with just HBM2 is enough. I mean, so 20% more bandwidth than the MI60 I basically have. But I think it's fair to say my card has more than enough bandwidth for how much compute it has. And so if they go from like 14 or 15 teraflops, which is what you get in the full MI60, to like 20 teraflops, 20% more bandwidth should be enough. And I do wonder if there will be a consumer version, because all rumors point to this literally not having video outputs included.
I mean, yeah, I think all these rumors about Arcturus, it is important to point out that this isn't really a consumer level card. And it just keeps popping up, every 2 to 3 months. I'm interested to see whenever they announce this damn thing. But
Yeah,
I doubt there will be a consumer level product.
yeah, and
for
for the people that hope to get this like a 120 compute unit instead of the 60 compute unit Radeon 7 for editing, I would consider it personally, just because I
Mhm.
think, depending on what it can do, but I think it's worth pointing out that it really is just for really specific compute workloads, because I really think RDNA 2 professional cards are going to be way better at a lot of editing tasks than people expect versus GCM. And by then, the drivers should be stable. And additionally, look, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, 20% more teraflops. Teraflops do not equal gaming performance. So what you might end up getting is a 300 watt card, or I think they said they're aiming for 250 watts now. That is only I don't know, 20% better at gaming than the Radeon 7.
I mean, it's
not
hard
even as good as a 6700 XT, whenever that comes out.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Who knows if it will even be that, especially given these modern architectures by AMD are more clock-based in performance in a lot of ways. I'm curious if that super low clock, high CU count would even translate to good gaming performance
at all. It might even perform worse. If it's 1.2 gigahertz instead of 1.8, like mine typically runs at 1850 megahertz while I'm gaming. Yeah, I mean, that again, for gaming, you want high clock speeds. That's obvious. So yeah, I don't think there's any consumer versions coming, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on to story number 11. A lot of stories this week, guys. This comes that Ampere is definitely being announced on May 14th. Nvidia tells people, and I'm reporting this from Video Cards, get amped for GDC 2020. And I wrote down this note, why can't AMD be good at marketing? What a brilliant way just to tweet, I hope you guys are getting amped, and they put it in all caps or something for May 14th. And now everyone's going to tune in, and I think it will only be the professional cards. I really don't think they're going to show consumer stuff yet. But yeah, that's interesting. So give it a month. We'll know what Ampere is.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see whatever they have to announce, even if it is just professional, because will probably get a trickle down of consumer gaming
Nvidia
cards.
trickle down economics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because their approach right now is more sell it to AI based people and then adapt those cards to.
Yeah, I mean, this coincides with the Turing launch. Turing was announced with professional cards first, and then they had all these demos, and then everyone was like, okay, so they're definitely going to have gaming versions, though, right? And then a few months later, they unveiled it, and then it came out. I think that came out pretty late in 2018, didn't it? Wasn't it October or September?
Yeah, I'm not remember. That sounds right, but
yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me if this came out more around Thanksgiving. But I know they're going to want to at least paper launch a Turing lineup when AMD is RDNA 2 out. There's no way. And I think
you mean an Ampere lineup, right?
Yeah, an Ampere lineup. I think they'll do massive Turing price cuts and paper launch Ampere when RDNA 2 is out, if it's not ready. And it could be. I mean, that's why they're using Samsung 8 nanometer, so they hopefully don't have capacity problems.
Yeah.
Anyways, let us move on to story number 12. Nvidia is working on 5 nanometer GPUs. Now, this surprised no one, and I have a couple links here, one from Tech Power Up, one from TechSpot. I'm not going to quote them, but it basically just confirms that Nvidia bought a bunch of capacity early for 5 nanometer, which I think is funny. TechSpot points out that in response, AMD bought more 5 nanometer capacity.
That's interesting. I'm not quite sure of what to make of that right now, but
yeah, I just think that's worth pointing out, that it's not like Nvidia bought up 5 nanometer capacity as a response to AMD buying up 7. No, well, they did do that as a response, but it's not like they just bought all of it. AMD already had allocated most of 5 nanometer, and they just bought even more when they saw Nvidia do that.
Yeah.
So they do. There does seem to be a legitimate strategy going on here of AMD buying out future nodes with their partner and just being like, it's just too bad.
The 5 nanometer war should be fun nonetheless, though.
Which is why I titled this thumbnail that there's so much 5 nanometer talk in this podcast. That's really when I see this all coming together. I think we're going to have Intel on 7 nanometer EUV in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
By 2022, if not end of 20.
Hopefully by then at least.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have AMD on 5 nanometer then. You'll have Nvidia following on 5 nanometer. There's going to be, and you should have Alder Lake out by then. And Alder Lake probably won't be as good as Zen 4, but it's going to be significantly better than what they have now. And I think late 2022 is when we should finally see some look at Intel's true response to Zen.
Yeah, it's been delayed, but
yeah, and that's the competition that we're going to see in like 2022, 2023. All this 5 nanometer stuff with like Intel, AMD, and Nvidia. And so I think that's where you're going to start to just get. I'm excited. I just think things are just going to keep getting more interesting every year here. You can see it. You can see the telegraphs for these companies getting ready for a war in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like this was the interesting years for a while, but I think the Intel response to AMD is when it's going to start getting really interesting. But
yeah. Well, that is all of the stories. I thought we would then get to some final reader mails here. Place Pants writes in and he says, please explain what the fuck a nit is in terms of screens and brightness measurements. Lumens, well, you're at it. Looking up a definition isn't the same as Tom's definition, and it seems like many of us use the spec nits without understanding what we're actually measuring. Well, Dan, you did some digging, so I think this is going to be the Dan definition.
I mean, the response is kind of a joke. A nit is a candela per meter squared, and a nit is a candela per some radian equivalent to a sphere per unit time. They're really abstract concepts. I think the best way to put a nit is it's about the brightness of a candle on a meter squared. So an OLED screen is the equivalent brightness of 1,000 candles per meter squared.
More like 800.
Yeah, so Tom's TV, it's probably the brightness total of 2,000 candles.
And we have a video coming out soon where we glue 800 candles to my screen and light them and see if it looks the same.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a good way.
That was a joke.
Oh, yes.
I just kept talking.
I got that was a joke, but I think we should. They're abstract concepts that I don't think it's 100% easy to say what exactly that means.
But so I'm not wrong that a nit is like each nit's supposed to be a candle at a meter or something.
One nit is supposed to be the equivalent brightness of a candle on a meter squared area, I think.
And to the people that go, well, a candle, that's not like an exact thing. It is. It is actually. Candles tend to have a standard brightness for most of them, if you haven't noticed. And that was standardized long time ago when they were like, we got to standardize these candles in the 1800s.
Yeah, because a couple of bored scientists got really excited about standards for a while. So,
well, I mean, if you think of the 1800s, that's when we understood science, late 1800s, but we couldn't make anything yet. So that's when they went crazy with theoretical physics and all of that stuff, because they're just like, well, someday this is what we could do. Too bad we're still riding horses. Must have been frustrating to be those people.
Yeah, and they just made weird contraptions to measure these things because they were too smart and too bored.
Right, like a machine that can clone you for a magic trick that drowns you at the same time.
Yeah, that's a biopic, I believe.
Yeah, that's a real true story. No, that's The Prestige with Hugh Jackman. Anyways, so I think that's all we have to say about that, though, right?
Yeah, it's just that overall, micro LED is like 10 times brighter than OLED. Theoretically, but that's the best I can give you. It's hard to say.
Yeah. It's something we'll probably address again in the future. Thanks for the question, though. Edwa G. Doe says, Tom, do you have any thoughts or info about MRAM? I've been reading a bunch and saw that Intel is already producing it. Also, Everspin and many other companies. How does it compare nowadays to normal DRAM? And could we see it in future designs sooner rather than later? Did you look this one up?
A little bit. All I could read is that there are certain drawbacks. It wasn't clear to me what the drawbacks were to MRAM.
What is MRAM?
So it's a non-volatile type of RAM, and he says that is already producing it. MRAM goes all the way back to the 80s, so it's also an old type of storage. I can't get really deep into it because it does get to a point where I don't understand what they're talking about. But.
Yeah, it's something on my list to look into more. The one thing I'll just say again about non-volatile memory is a lot of it comes down to, like, can we make something that can effectively work as an SSD, but we remove the latency bottlenecks and of course make it a lot faster bandwidth that you would traditionally get in storage, so that we can have one flat thing of storage, right? Storage, RAM, whatever. Because, if you really think about how your PCs work, you basically have like 1,000 tiers of like moving data around. And so you'll have to take data that's on the SSD when you install a game, and then you got to load it into the DDR. And then that gets loaded into the VRAM or your graphics card. And then they also load the most access things into the cache of your CPU. And so you're doing a lot of the same shit over and over. And that's, from my understanding, some kind of half step Sony's trying to do with the PS5's SSD. It's not just about the bandwidth. If you actually pay attention to Cerny's presentation, it's about the 6 tiers of storage access. It's about actually scaling up. They actually wanted to scale load times up linearly with bandwidth. And in a traditional SSD, just making it faster doesn't solve that problem.
Yeah.
And so I can't wait to see how well it works. But that's what they're trying to do. It's not the same as if it was 800 gigabytes, I don't think, of Optane. I don't think it's that good. But, well, it might be. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Optane hasn't impressed me that much yet. A lot of it could be the software, though. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the dream, is just being able to have one giant pool of storage that doesn't lose what you were doing when you turn off a computer, and you can just access one piece of information instead of having to duplicate it and swap it between parts constantly.
Yeah. So
I think it's the future. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, that could be true. And maybe something like MRAM becomes outdated as a non-volatile storage, like SSD is, like, maybe that just replaces the idea of MRAM as that gets as fast as RAM.
There's a lot of different types of non-volatile storage coming out. I think there's some things Sony's now working on that I just haven't looked into because it's not in anything coming out soon. Of course, there's Optane. I know Micron and IBM, I think. Don't quote me on that, guys, but I know IBM's working on it. I know Micron is too. So there's all different types of companies working on this type of stuff. And I do think it's the future for the reasons we just talked about. Sage of Geeks writes in, and he says, with the consoles using super fast SSDs for VRAM, do you think PC will go the same route or just continue to make bigger cards? So I did basically a whole video about this reader mail, the more I thought about it. For those who don't know, the RDNA 3 video that came out 24th, that came from me and Dan just walking the dogs about what PC, like, let's say for a second the PlayStation 5's SSD is as revolutionary as they claim it is. We don't know until we have proof, but let's say it is. What would PC do? Me and Dan were just talking. You just put an SSD on the graphics card. They're not that expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's accurate to say that that's the solution, or just making bigger graphics cards is the solution, which it depends which one scales more easily over time. I would place my bet on the larger fast storage / RAM would be the easier solution over time than a bigger graphics card, especially as scaling issues start to.
Well, there's inherent, and again, I covered this in the video. I mean, AMD's been talking about doing this on mainstream cards since 2016, which is really one thing that made that video so good, as I realized. I want to just say this, guys. Watch that video and then read that Tom's Hardware article from 2016 talking about the Pro SSG graphics card that had something similar to a PS5 on it, really. And you'll see that, like, it read like the Mark Cerny press conference, except 4 years ago, and it was from AMD. So you can see they've been working on this since then. Yeah,
it was pretty funny when you showed me that, like, the next morning after that conversation, they were like, oh, this is a thing that they've been at least working on at some level for 4 years now, then 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, like AMD wants to do this. And that's something Cortex has talked about too, just as an example, just that I remember him talking about. That's why I bring him up, is he's like, I don't know what NVIDIA's solution will be if the PlayStation 5 works out, but maybe they'll just load entire games into the RAM. And so, yeah, so if we can get graphics cards that have 96 gigabytes of RAM, I guess you could just load the whole game into that.
Or like what you said, like 2 tiers of RAM where there's just a massive pool of slower RAM, like we see on what the PS5 will be.
Yeah. But again, it's not just about the SSD; it's about the controller.
Yeah.
And anyways, in terms of fast VRAM, well, the Xbox does not have the same type of storage, and it doesn't matter how many times you bang your head against a wall and tell yourself it does. It doesn't. You know, there's nothing you can do to make up for the fact that its SSD has half the bandwidth, especially less than half the uncompressed bandwidth.
Yeah.
But yeah, less like 40% the bandwidth if it's uncompressed, which is important if you're using it as RAM. And then the controller is like less than half as powerful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comparison would be like saying, well, I mean, DDR2 and DDR3, they're basically the same thing. Like that would be the equivalent of saying the.
I think it'd be like comparing DDR2 to DDR5.
Maybe, yeah.
Because it's not just about the bandwidth; it's also about how you're utilizing it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I'm saying at a minimum, it's like, those aren't the same thing, and saying, well, they're basically the same as.
And I don't want to see any velocity architecture comments. It's a marketing term. You mean Zen 2 and RDNA?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There will be custom tweaks to it, but velocity is a word. I don't, And so anyways, I mean, the solution though for PC, which is what that video is mostly about, is just putting really fast storage next to the CPU and the GPU to brute force the problem, I think.
Yeah.
And I think they will sooner rather than later. In fact, there's some really interesting little snippets I've been noticing, kind of like connecting the dots about what might be going on with the next gen RDNA cards. But it's like, I just don't have enough information to really
make a full video.
No, but I will I already have some previous like articles and like statements from AMD and Cerny that I will reference. I have a feeling in the future, depending on what we see AMD announce soon. And I guess let's move on, though. So Faceplants writes in and he says, Tom, would you bet $50 that in most games on the new consoles, frame rates will be within 20% or less between them? Absolutely, I'll take that bet. It's not even close. Like, and here's why. You specifically framed the question, the frame rates will be within 20%. Well, yeah, they're both going to work at 60 frames. I think there's a chance we could be seeing locked 60. Probably
on both consoles, you mean? Or
yes.
Probably.
If there's any visual difference, it will not be the frame rate, guys.
Yeah, you might see higher resolution on one console or over the other.
Depending on the game. Because I was thinking about it, for a while it was bothering me, like, why the hell does Xbox think 2.5 gigabytes of system RAM is enough? Because 3.5 gigabytes is reserved for the OS. What game do you have that only uses 6 gigabytes of RAM?
None.
And to be fair, it would be 6 gigabytes of RAM with a Chrome tab or two open because it's handling the OS as well.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it. Oh, wait a second. The PlayStation only has access to 5 gigabytes. For some reason, they waste 3 gigabytes on the OS.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why. They think 6 gigabytes is enough for system RAM for next gen if they use BCPack and their other, custom code processors to swap out information from the SSD fast enough.
Which, yeah, I mean, I guess they're not, I don't think they're quite calling it system RAM. But I don't know. It's two separate pools pretty much, right?
And they said they will use the 10 gigabyte pool for system RAM in games that need it. But It's so bizarre, it's not a unified segment. And for those that say they can pull from both at the same time, they can't because the CPU can only access.
Because of how computers work?
Yeah, they can't. You would have to have, don't get me wrong, it's not the same as a PC. It has co-processors and stuff. And then I thought about that. I'm like, oh, so it is. It's just like last gen consoles. They think 6 gigabytes is enough because current gen games on the consoles have like 3 gigabytes for the system and 2 gigabytes for VRAM. If it's 5.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So that's probably why they think it's enough. And so let me say this, though. I think Senua's Sacrifice may be fine. 2?
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to be what?
That doesn't need almost any RAM.
Yeah, there's not much AI in that game. There's not much anything.
So when it comes to Senua's Sacrifice or games that are walking simulators, I could see the Xbox Series X having 8K options.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like a 320-bit 52 compute unit RDNA 2 card. Maybe even 8K with an unlocked frame rate.
Yeah.
But I don't know how an open world game can quite literally fit in that.
Yeah, I don't know how they could. Hopefully they can. Maybe they'll be able to limit the size of the OS over time.
Well, that's the thing a developer said to me is he's like, there's going to be some very real texture problems.
Yeah, you said that.
And he said even with BCPack, by the way, fanboys. He said he's like that's only there to mitigate an issue they created for themselves, which is they're gonna have to swap in information constantly between the segments.
I mean, yeah, we'll see. I think at least early on there won't be issues, but if PCs start adapting to them more closely to the model that the PS5 follows, I think later gen games are going to have issues, definitely.
Well, especially if RDNA comes out with the same stuff the PS5 has.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And then, of course, Ampere would follow or whatever, because like Nvidia's not going to let.
Yeah, they're not going to let AMD take over the market.
No, Nvidia's not stupid. They got smart people there. I mean, I guess the only other thing I'll say is I did see I'm getting some leaks coming out about Horizon that there should be a demo shown in a month. And supposedly the polygon count on the main character is more than every character in the previous game combined.
Which is crazy. That's
like a PS2
massive.
to PS3 leap.
Yeah. That's huge. Wait, do they mean character like NPCs, or do they also mean
everything?
Robots?
Every character, robot, everything. All those polygons combined, that's what's in the new character model.
Yeah, so that's an insane leap in performance.
It's a lot of work to make that, too.
Yeah, I wonder if that's even necessary, but it'll look good.
Yeah, I don't know, but like, so I just want to throw that out there. That's a rumor, so let's leave it as that.
Yeah.
But if that's true, that's not the 10 teraflops allowing them to do that.
No, it's not.
No, it's the fact that they have to do half the draw calls or whatever that they used to have to.
Yeah. Regardless, I'm excited to see it. Anything other than last-gen games running on the new consoles.
Which is a big video I want to do soon. I want to do a video analyzing what the performance leap will be. Or Xbox to 360 polygon count increases and like looking at quotes of games back then and then comparing that to what we have now. So I don't think we'll have enough information for that video for a month or two. But I think we will. And I suspect next gen is going to be a PS2 to PS3 leap.
Hopefully. It seemed like early...
Or closer to that than what we got last gen.
It seemed like early numbers they were putting out would indicate not to be true, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if those numbers were accurate. Like them saying that the Xbox Series X is like, I think they said it was like twice as strong as the Xbox One X. Yeah, it doesn't sound right to me at all.
Microsoft have been really weird with their quotes before. I remember on Jimmy Fallon, they said the Xbox One is 3 times stronger than the 360, and the audience practically booed.
Yeah, and
which, by the way, guys, for as weak as I think the Xbox One is, it was more than 3 times stronger. The processor alone, I think, was at least 3 times stronger, even though it was a weak tablet GPU. And the graphics card was at least 4 to 6 times better than the 360. So I'm not sure they got that 3 times quote.
I feel like that was a misquote or something.
And the Series X is not twice as strong as the One X.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that.
4 times.
Yeah.
It's probably more like 6 times.
Yeah, I mean, at least looking at the raw numbers, that's what it looks like at least.
I mean, I'd say double the GPU IPC probably, and then double the teraflops, but then also significantly, I mean, the CPU is like 8 times better. The CPU 10 times better.
Yeah, CPUs, it's harder to compare.
The SSD is like 100 times better.
What do you mean? Than the 5400 RPM hard drive?
Yeah, so yeah, I think it may have had a solid state hard drive actually.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know for sure. I know some models of the Xbox One did. So yeah, it's not twice as strong. I think the next gen leap's going to be bigger than last gen.
I hope so, and it seems like it has the potential to be at least.
So, but I think that's a fun note to close on. We will cover that in the future. A lot of interesting stuff coming. This is the stories we had for this. I guess the last thing I'll say is do remember this is a podcast. You can listen to this while driving, gardening, walking your dog. I listen to podcasts while playing other video games like Warband, right? I don't need to hear the sounds half the time.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that a lot lately, listening to Comedy Bang Bang while playing Warband on our desktops near each other.
Yeah.
And so just remember that and review us on Apple Podcasts. And if you like this, support us on Patreon. Dan's a real boy now, so
I'm a real boy.
The scraps I throw him matter while he becomes a grad student.
Yeah, tries to become a big doctor boy.
Big doctor boy. Any final words, Dan?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Goodbye.
The following podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcast, videos, articles, and other media. However, Moore's Law is Dead is a team. with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and select technical editing by Carbon Cry. You can find all of our information, including how to get a hold of us, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. And if you are a fan and would like to send mail or other hardware, please mail parcels to Moore's Law's Dead, P.O. Box 10468, Peoria, Illinois 61612. And speaking of fans, without exaggeration, the patrons are solely responsible for the continued distribution of the content you just listened to. And so if you have some extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon Die Shrink and Loose Ends, and of course the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you. I am one of them. The Discord is only at $1, and at higher tiers, you get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the back catalog of Flyover States podcast, thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts, and other perks as well. And if you cannot afford to support us, please just share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media and Reddit. And give Broken Silicon and Flyover States a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. All of this really does help so much more than I think anyone realizes. If you'd like to advertise on the podcast or a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its fans supporting it. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels.
Bootman, Carbon Cry, Dean, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim Bollocks, Jordan Betcher, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Loud, Gribbeth, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Brad Medlin, Phil S., Thyrister, The Ninth Dude, Greg Renegar, John Bible, Chrysantine, Night Rogue 77, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Diesel, Daniel Hyde, Matthew McMullen, Christoph Novak, Neil X01, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Sexy, Scott Schoaf, Sadler, Richard Cohagon, Alethros, Telos, Caden Picknell, Greg T. Wanchek, Jacob Barber, Exo T1 Care Bear, Matthew Lane, Paul Jones, Jan Rauner, Robert Dux, Edward Huff, Ali Robertson, Gordon Lamb, Jonathan, Drita Full, Evan Dingle, Nick Neasy, Dominic Dewart, Harold P. Bureau, Wayne, Sam MacArthur, James Crasta, TSPCFS, Michael Costa, Andrew S., Yeah, I Passed, and Total Silent. Of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.